Hey, welcome back. I'm Carissa and I have started my Master Gardener's training. I am maybe about a third or a quarter of the way through and I'm enjoying myself so much. There's such a nice variety of topics. There's such a wealth of information. All the presenters are very well versed in their specific topics that they're presenting, and it's just been really fun to do my training. Another part of it is sharing my knowledge, my summary with you guys. If you are interested in the series, I will link it below. There are a lot of different topics. We started with botany, soil, composting, those types of things. Today's topic is Firesmart landscaping. So like I said in my previous videos, I am condensing hours and hours of training, pre-reading, and putting it into a short video for you, just to give you an overview of what is included so far. So this is a huge topic. You can totally do further research on your own if you're interested. So first I wanted to say that wildfires have affected a lot of us. I am located in BC, Canada, and last year was actually our most devastating in BC recorded history. Our most devastating year. Wildfires burnt down forests and homes and communities, and it was very devastating and very sad. I know, south of us and east of us, Alberta, Oregon, Washington, California, across the globe, we have been experiencing a lot of wildfires. This is definitely a relevant topic and a sensitive one at that. But today's goal is just to give you ideas in how to landscape your own residential property, whether it's an acreage, even a condo, and just a normal city lot. There are different ways to mitigate the risk, and also some design tips as well to make sure that you do have a beautiful garden still. So what is Firesmart landscaping? Our presentation was put on by a super informative woman. She's involved with the BC Firesmart organization here we have locally in our province. And I hope most provinces or states would have this sort of resource or education out there to inform its residents. But if you are curious, I will link down below the BC Firesmart website. It's a wealth of knowledge, and I think it's applicable to most landscapes and climates. So if you want to check it out, it'll be linked below. So the definition of Firesmart landscaping is designing a yard and maintaining with the goal of reducing damage and loss from wildfires, right? So it's not eliminating. We can never eliminate the risk of a wildfire, but we can limit or reduce the effect. Two main factors would be what is planted and where it is planted. And those are the two things we'll be discussing the most throughout my presentation today. And just to get rid of one of the misconceptions right away, the goal is to create an attractive, functional landscape that limits the ignition or spread of a fire. This is still wanting to produce a beautiful garden. And keeping in mind just certain key factors of how a fire behaves, just so you can mitigate that risk for yourself. So I think a lot of us sort of think of a lot of rock, right? Rock might suppress or control or cause a break for a fire. Limiting the use of evergreens, that is correct, but there are different ways to go about that. So I was relieved by this presentation. A lot of those misconceptions were cleared up for me, and she really encouraged us that we can still have a beautiful yard, but just protect ourselves with certain different things, placement, plant selection, and it was actually very empowering, this presentation. There are a few considerations and factors when you are trying to understand what a fire is and how it behaves in order to protect your own property. So there's a fire triangle, and that includes wind, air, and fuel. Without one of those things, a fire cannot continue. So obviously we can't control air. There's oxygen outside. There will always be. But the wind and the fuel are the other things, right? So creating a windbreak would be one way to control our wind. Fuel, that is the factor we can most control in our own properties. Fuel. Fuel, if you think of you're making a campfire, you're out in the wilderness, what are you going to use to build your fire, right? Needles, small branches, dry wood, that type of thing, paper, things that are very flammable. So that would be the easiest to combust, and thus would make the easiest way to start a fire. So thinking like that, and then thinking about what surrounds our homes, is really the foundation of protecting your own property. Embers were a big focus of this presentation because I think 50% of the cause of house fires are embers. Embers are a big concern, and understanding how a fire moves and how far embers can travel in certain different wind patterns, the height of them, understanding all of those really helps us understand why we want to create fire breaks and different sort of things to sort of break the pattern of a fire and sort of stop it in its tracks, or even slow it down would even be helpful. And then thinking about our environment, right? If you are in a forest, that is a very different landscape than your own. There are some commonalities within our own landscapes and a wild forest, right? We have our understory, low growing perennials, and then we've got our taller trees and shrubs. It creates a slope for a fire to travel, and breaking up those, leaving room in between plants, is something we will discuss in a minute. So instead of being overwhelmed about all the things that we can do, it was broken up into 3 zones and 3 different sort of considerations when you are designing or maintaining your own property, and things to consider. So obviously this is a huge topic, even down to the construction of your house. That plays a big part in how well or how intense a fire might burn. So that is another topic, but today we are just focusing on landscaping. So the immediate zone would be between 0 and 1.5 meters around surrounding your house. So right up against your house. A lot of people like to stack their firewood right against their house. That is a no-no, right? Those are very flammable materials. Keep all your flammable materials well away from your house, right? Because that is just a fire waiting to happen, literally. Fuel. If you store your maybe your gas lawnmower near your house, maybe consider moving it farther away from your house, right? Everything that is placed close to your house or even touching your house is just making it that much easier for a fire to burn. A lot of people like to mulch with needles or bark, which are very dry and very flammable. It's a consideration to rock landscape around your house, and that is a natural fire break. Fire cannot burn rock, so it is a natural fire break. Cement would also be a fire break as well. And then considering trees and branches. Any trees or branches that are touching or near that 1.5 meter sort of zone, it would be a good idea to stop the potential route for a fire by stopping and cutting those branches and making sure that those branches aren't within that zone. And then we have the intermediate zone, which would be 1.5 to 10 meters around surrounding your house. So thinking about if you are replacing your deck anyway, using a material that is more fire resistant is a great idea. The presenter even offered a suggestion about breaking up your fence, right? If you have a wood fence for most of your property, it might not be feasible to replace the entire fence, but changing out just the gate to a metal gate is a great way to stop that pattern again, because the gate would be attached to the home and thus less fuel for that fire to keep going with. Maintaining all of your plants in a proper way, which if you're a gardener, you probably are, right? You're removing all the dead or the dying branches, removing needles that have fallen, bark that has fallen, anything dry that, again, would make a great campfire is something that needs to be removed in this zone of your home. And then we have our extended zone, which would be 10 to 30 meters and beyond, depending on how large your lot is, right? So 30 meters is sometimes the typical city lot, but then, you know, some of us live on acreages, so we're concerned about maybe beyond the 30 meters. So we talked about ladder fuel. So again, if we're thinking about a forest, we've got our understory plants, ground cover, and then the middle story, you know, shrubs, taller shrubs, and then our trees would be the high canopies. And that creates a ladder, right? When we've got that easy transition for a fire to move, the intensity sort of can take off, especially when you've got the tall trees. So those tall trees need to be as far away from your home as possible. So making sure they're on that extended area of your zone, because the intense fires happen at the tallest canopy trees. The understory plants can burn, obviously, but the more intense fire happens at that tall canopy of those tall trees. So removing those trees from the surrounding area of your house, remember removing branches that sort of touch your home, removing some of the limbs on the really tall trees. I think up to 3 meters you want to be limbing up your tree, and it just sort of breaks that natural pattern that the fire has, less the intensity of that fire. Another maintenance tip would be to clean your gutters. A lot of us who have those conifers surrounding our homes, we have a lot of needles dropping, or even deciduous leaves that can dry out depending on what season you're in. That is a fire waiting to happen as well. So again, maintaining your gutter system, removing all of that clutter is a very smart idea. Okay, so knowing all of these zones now and what precautions we can take in order to safeguard our homes, here's a good idea on where to start. So to assess, take a walk around your home. Sort of think like a fire would think. Remember, like, imagine you're on a campfire, you're going to roast some marshmallows. What burns well, right? Think about that. Put that lens on while you're assessing your own property. Make a to-do list for what needs fixing. Make a to-do list for what trees need to be removed. The most important area is obviously protecting your own home. So start there. Start in that immediate zone and work your way around and slowly work your way out just to make sure you are mitigating the risk. Now, I discussed in my composting video, composting done well is not a concern because like I mentioned, water is an essential part of a healthy compost. So if your compost is maintained well, watered well, it shouldn't be an issue. But if you have recently put a ton of dry leaves on top, a ton of needles on top, you haven't watered it, you haven't turned your compost, it could be a concern, right? So we're always maintaining these things and keeping an eye on how they're doing. Okay, now the fun part, designing with your Firesmart lens on. So I've mentioned creating fuel breaks. Fuel breaks are any sort of material or plant spacing that you are doing in order to stop that pattern of a potential fire from burning. So a dry creek bed is a great idea. We live in a very dry climate. So some people would do a pond or a stream, and those are great too. But even a dry creek bed is not only visually appealing, but it also is a natural fire break and a nice accent to your garden as well. Making sure that you have 3 meters in between the canopies of your evergreens is also a great way to reduce the risk. Evergreens are very flammable. They're a risk, so if you are wanting to have one, like I said, away from your home is the best place, but also making sure you've got 3 meters in between each of the canopies of those evergreen trees. And that will likely reduce or slow down the ignition of a fire. Maintaining a healthy lawn. If you are trying to be a little bit water smart or conscious, and you are leaving your grass long and it is, you know, a foot or 2 long and very dry, that is a risk, right? You might be saving some water, but you are putting yourself at risk for a fire sweeping through that dry grass. So keeping your lawn at about 4 inches is a great idea, not only for water conservation, but it also shades the roots, which creates a healthier lawn, and it also will require less fertilizing and maintenance because it has that extra little bit of shade. So about 4 inches in the hottest part of summer is a great idea for your lawn. So that healthy lawn will be a fire break, a great thing to have in your yard. So minimizing fuel ladders is another design consideration. And it's a little bit tricky, right? If we want to have symmetry in our gardens, or maybe we want a nice drift of evergreens closely planted together, it's a little bit risky. And it's something that you need to consider when you're planning your garden, right? We're always making compromises when we're designing, whether it's to be water smart or fire smart, or it's a budget that we are trying to work within. We're always making decisions based on certain things. So if you would like to cluster your evergreens together, just be aware that it is a risk factor for a potential fire. But breaking up that evergreen canopy, like I said, is a great idea. Adding some deciduous in between, maybe some more fire-resistant plants in between is a great idea, and maybe even the odd dry creek bed, like I mentioned. Okay, and that brings me to plant selection. We will have a whole slide on this, but being aware that there are plants that are more fire-resistant and less fire-resistant, just being mindful about when you are purchasing plants and bringing them home. It's just one of those things, right? Reading the tag, understanding what your plant needs is a great idea. And proper maintenance, right? We've talked about this, pruning your trees, getting rid of all the dead and damaged limbs, limbing up your large, tall trees to just break that pattern again. They are all good practices to be fire smart. Okay, plant selection. These are traits of a plant that would ignite easily. So leaves that have a strong odor when crushed. I don't understand why, but if those plants have a strong odor, they will typically be a little less fire resistant. Another one, stems and branches that have a gummy sap with a strong odor again. So super gummy sap, probably not very fire resistant. And then fine dead dry materials such as loose papery bark, we think of birch with that, twigs or needles, and leaves within the plant. So those are all things that are very conducive for a coniferous tree, right? Needles, dry bark, traits that are a little bit more risky. And then we get to the plants that are less likely to burn. They are more fire resistant. There's no plant that is fireproof. anything will burn if given the right circumstances, but these are less likely to ignite a very intense fire. So moist, supple leaves. We think of things like boxwood. Boxwood is a very good choice for this type of category. Water, like sap, with little to no odor. So we're looking for no odor, and the sap isn't as gummy as we said previously. So a more watery sap is a more fire-resistant plant. Last, limited buildup of dead material. So a plant that doesn't have the tendency to produce all that dead material is more fire-resistant. So I know what you're thinking. Does this mean no evergreens? I also love evergreens. I'm surrounded by a forest, and that's a whole nother topic, mitigating that risk. But I think allowing yourself to have balance within these topics and within your design needs and wants is a really good idea. So no, you don't have to get rid of all your evergreens, but there are a few things that you can consider just to alleviate some of that risk. So consider removing evergreens that are within your 1.5 meter zone, right? That's that immediate zone surrounding your house. Evergreens there are a little bit more risky. Low-growing conifers could be less risky. Apparently junipers are quite flammable, and I have quite a few junipers. But typically the low-growing conifers are less intense in their heat, so they're a little bit of a better choice. So you can also mitigate by limbing up your tall conifers. So like I said, if you have a 30-foot blue spruce, removing some of those lower branches is a great idea. And again, you can make some design considerations, maybe underplanting it would be a good idea, but also leaving room in between so it's not super packed in, but limbing up your evergreens is a great practice. The last consideration would be to consider a broadleaf evergreen. So like I said, boxwoods are a great alternative. They have a little bit more of a moist leaf, making them more fire resistant. They also provide year-round interest, which is why we love them. So I gathered most of my information that I shared with you today from my presentation, which I said was part of the BC Firesmart resource, which is our local governing body resource center. I'm pretty sure most people in North America would have one, at least in the state or their neighboring state or province. So just do a quick Google search and you could probably find a lot of good resources and pamphlets and different documents online that gives you a lot of information pertaining to your specific area. You can totally go on BC Firesmart, their website, and check out some of those resources that I have mentioned. I think for the most part they would be applicable to most people depending on your zone and climate. And one resource that she did share was a plant list guide, and it is amazing, amazing. So I will insert a screenshot of the website, and it is really, really neat because you can search by immediate zone, like plants that you would want to have right next to your house or nearby your house, and then plants that you would want further away from your house. So you can sort it that way. You can sort it by the scientific name. You can sort it by sun, shade, zone. And then it also gives you numerous different lists. So it gives you trees, shrubs, annuals, grasses, lawn choices, and that type of thing. So yeah, I really encourage you to get on the internet, do some research, and gather some information that pertains to your local climate and environment. I think it's very empowering just understanding how fire works and how to just mitigate risk. And I think we don't need to be afraid, but just making wise choices and really maintaining our yards is a great start. And the last thing would be mitigating risk with prescribed fires. So if you do live in an area near forests, you might even hear or see on the news, the Ministry of Forestry is working on their prescribed fires. So they're doing a burnout to get rid of some of that leaf drop and needle drop and just something that forests actually do on their own. This is a natural, reoccurring part of nature that actually happens with or without us humans. Understanding that this is a natural thing and that prescribed fire is actually benefiting the forest and regenerating some of that plant health. And just to end on a positive note, we had a local community here in BC, and it was a success story because we had wildfires coming through. We were on a wildfire watch for a little bit. Not sure if we were going to have to evacuate, but this local town, they did what they had to do prior to wildfire season. So they were getting rid of dead, fallen trees, branches, getting rid of needles, doing those prescribed fires. And when the wildfire season swept through and was coming near to their town, they actually were a success, and it had minimal damage to them because they were on the ball and doing things that they needed to do ahead of time, not in wildfire season, but ahead of time. So I think we can take note of that that and just be more thoughtful and mindful about when we're planting, when we're placing trees, when we're selecting trees, as we're maintaining our yards, just to be more aware of those things. Well, that wraps up my segment on being fire smart. I really enjoyed this topic, and I hope you did too. Next episode for our Master Gardener series will be water wise. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.